What's going on there, folks? Good evening. It's the Earthmaster back here on this Thursday night. It is February 2nd, 2023, about 9:45 a.m. or a.m. Yeah, right. p.m. here along the West Coast. Nighttime hours. This is not the morning. Definitely not the morning hours here. Make sure I turn this down a little bit so we're not overblowing the microphone here. All right, latest earthquake activity shows, what do we got here? Check out the globe, 1.5, California. 1.5 in California right now, the latest quake here out there on the globe. Let's go ahead and check out the flat scale model Earth here, and we're going to start down here into the Middle America Trench area. Got a little bit of activity kicking off the coast of the Nicaragua area. One earthquake here within the last hour, 4.2, 33 kilometers deep. A little bit of uptick here across the Middle America Trench kicking up here tonight and over the last 24 hours. Notice here, though, look at that 2.6 into an odd area of Texas. Very odd because there's just not a whole lot of activity that really kicks up here southeast of the San Antonio area. We don't see earthquake country out here yet, but let it be known out there to everyone out there that earthquake activity will be increasing. There's a lot of, shall we take a look? Shall we take a look here, folks? Or do I need to go any further? Do I need to go any further here on this map? Can you guys see all that? You know me. I kind of like to point facts out here on this channel. This channel is all about facts. It's not about fear-mongering, not about the crystal ball earthquake reader, that there's going to be an 8-pointer here one day and California is going to get hit by a 7-pointer one day. Well, obviously, if you say that enough, yeah, we get it. It's going to happen. There's a lot of earthquake predictors here on YouTube, and I'm not one of them. Definitely not. But I do like to point out facts. I do like to point out areas of quiet zone. And I do like to point out areas of interest when it comes to seismic activity. That's what we do here on this channel. Okay, so enough of that. Enough of the, what's that called? Ranting? Ranting and raving out here. Well, ranting, I guess. I'm not really raving about anything tonight aside from my barbecue dinner tonight. 2.6 in the last hour, southern Texas. So southern Texas consists of a considerable amount of oil pumping operations out here, more so than any other areas across Texas. I've seen so many refineries and pumping operations out here in Texas where the gas is cheap, obviously, right? But also, at the same time, what are you guys going to do with that wastewater injection well, right? Wastewater disposal facilities take place and they get rid of that wastewater. But either way, this 2.6 striking out there in the what's that, Hisa oil field. There's a couple different oil fields out here, and we need to go to the satellite view to get a little better perspective out here. I remember seeing these oil fields when I fly into Texas, and they're goodness, you guys see all those little white checkered marks out there on the satellite view? Well, those are not, lovely farmhouses out there in the prairies of Texas. Those are wastewater disposal facilities, and there's one right there. There's a not a big operation, but your standard operation with a wastewater pond. You got to do something with that wastewater. You can't leave it at a surface level. Otherwise, people start getting suspicious. Why is all that wastewater out there? It causes issues. So they inject it down into the surface below, and nobody will know about it, right? Well, yeah, I think not. These earthquakes have provided enough proof out there to relate the two. Here's a 2.6 occurring within this facility right here. Now, a lot of times these wastewater disposal wells are positioned in an unknown area or inconspicuous area where it doesn't, where you wouldn't see that on the map, so to speak. So this 2.6 occurring 4.4 kilometers below this area. It kind of looks like there's maybe a farmhouse out here and some farmland being adjusted here on the map. But goodness, goodness, there's quite a bit of oil fields out here, quite a bit of wastewater disposal ponds. These are ponds. These are not swimming pools for your kids to float in, you know. Hey guys, want to go out and swim in a pool out here in Texas? No, this is not the spot to swim. So there's always processes involved in terms of getting rid of that wastewater process. And, well, you get earthquakes. And this area of Texas has an enormous amount of wastewater disposal wells, oil fracking, pumping operations. And this area will eventually be hit by some 4s and 5s. And I'm talking about magnitude earthquakes eventually. We've seen it over here in Pecos, Texas, the older pumping operations out here. It's only a matter of time before these folks here, you know, they kind of reap what they sow, right? There's a lot of money involved in the oil fields and whatnot out here in Texas. And but also at the same time, you have to think about the repercussions there. There's a lot of damage to be done to people's homes when it comes to earthquakes, and there's been quite a bit of lawsuits out here in terms of well, people suing the oil folks there because of earthquake damage. It's been halted up here in Oklahoma. There was a big earthquake out here a few years ago, 5.7 I think, in the oil fields. And, man, quite a few folks jumped in on a huge lawsuit. And the state actually suspended the oil field operations out there in a portion of Oklahoma up here. I can't remember exactly where it was at, northern Oklahoma. And due to that earthquake damage. So, you know, the damage is done out there into the state of Texas. I absolutely love Texas. But these oil fields out here are... you know, it's done. The damage is out there. It's only a matter of time before we see a 5 or 6 pointer out here southeast of San Antonio. And this is getting into the area of a more populated density there into areas of Texas. So it's there. We've seen it up there into areas of Alberta. Or man, when was it? 2 months ago? I believe it was about 2 months ago. Up in their oil fields. Their wastewater disposal wells. It's very similar to what's going on in Texas up here into portions of Alberta. Wherever you're making weak areas in the crust where pressure is built up, you get these earthquakes. Whenever you're injecting wastewater down below the surface there, you're kind of messing with nature in my aspect there. I'm not a big fan of people that you know, abuse the laws of nature. I'm a big fan of nature. I'll put that right out front. I'm not afraid to mention it because I love nature. I love weather. I love everything that has to do with the earth. I'm not a big fan of man, but I have to do what I got to do to survive here. But I'm more on the side of nature than anything. So, yeah, activity in Texas, no surprise. This will probably kick up here over the years around the San Antonio area. So get used to it. Movement around the New Madrid zone way earlier this morning at 1.7. So let's take a look at the bigger picture here. See what we got going on here around the area of the West Coast. Now, not a whole lot of activity kicking up around the San Andreas Fault. We got 1.6 there on the northern end of the San Jacinto Fault zone. It's been fairly active over the last couple days. The San Andreas Fault, not so much. Looking up north here, Ridgecrest is calming down. Of course, they did see a little bit of activity here a couple days ago. That area is mellowing out, so to speak. We are seeing a little bit of noticeable increase here along the creeping segment of the San Andreas Fault. This is where the plate boundary creeps, and that's why they call it. You think I'm joking? Look at that on your map right there. It says the San Andreas Fault zone creeping section. That's not a joke. I'm not being sarcastic there when I'm talking about these specific fault names. This thing creeps on occasion, and more so than not. There's technically, there's not a whole lot of larger scale activity that kicks up here because the strain doesn't build up because we're always noticing creep. We're noticing that sliding between the two plates here. You got the North American side here on the, make sure I got this set up, on the eastern side of the plate boundary, headed down to the southeast, while the area here of the Pacific plate heads up to the northwest. So, I don't know if you've heard about it in school, but they say eventually Los Angeles will be up here around the San Francisco area. So, yeah, you guys can enjoy one huge city. I will not be there for one. Yeah, large cities, no thank you. I'm not definitely not ashamed to admit that. But either way, so this creeping segment here of the San Andreas Fault is a good indicator of what's going on out here along the West Coast in terms of plate stress. And today, it's amplified out here, meaning that there's definitely going to be some increasing activity in this area. Now, with this type of movement along the creeping segment, we tend to note areas up here around the Bay Area showing typically signs of increasing activity. So far, we have not seen it, but a lot of this activity kicking up in the early evening and afternoon time frame of today. So watch here overnight and potentially here tomorrow for some further activity around the Bay Area in Northern California. A little bit of activity around the Redway area. That is a 20 kilometer deep 2.1. Now, you guys know what's down there at 20 kilometers, right? I would hope so. If you guys watch this channel enough, you'll know that the Cascadia subduction zone sits down there into the area. And looking at the map tonight, we got 243 epicenters. That's a pretty large uptick in tremor underneath the valley here of southern Oregon, outside of Medford, Grants Pass, northward. Now, this activity is not surface activity, but occurring down there at about 45 kilometers deep. That does add further strain out here westward. And also, as a plate boundary as a whole, the Cascadia tends to build up quite a bit of stress with that tremor occurring down dip. And so, therefore, the activity continues to build down at the southern end of the Cascadia. We haven't really seen any further activity offshore of Oregon, but I'm sure the strain is building there. It's just a matter of time before, this. Unfortunately, a lot of people think, wow, this, Highway 1, I think it's Highway 1 that runs up here, right? Or 101. I've taken this trip many times up there from Northern California. I kind of head over here from Chico up to about Red Bluff and scoot, or is it Redding? 299. Yeah, 299 out of Redding over towards Eureka and head up this coastline, all up and down the Oregon coastline with my kids over the years. It's a beautiful, absolutely beautiful trip, oceanic scenes. But, when you zoom in, you think of the flatland. You got the oceanic view, some mountains here to the east, green pines everywhere. But there's a danger lurking offshore here that poses a major threat to destroy everything that we think is beautiful. There's a lot of beautiful areas out here along the western coast, but those will not be so much when the big one strikes out here along the Cascadia. We're talking about 9.0, 9.2. And the shaking alone can do quite a bit of damage, but it's the tsunami, the subsequent tsunami that will sweep in and definitely cover a lot of the west coast here. I'm talking about Coos Bay, and this is not fear-mongering. This is legit activity. Lincoln City, Bay City, Waldport, all these areas will be underwater. How much depends on how big the tsunami is, but the potential is there. If you ever visited this area of the West Coast, you'll know that you'll see entering into a tsunami zone, tsunami evacuation zone. And there's reason for that, because the threat is real. It's not fear-mongering. It's not scaring anybody. It's just a potential threat that exists when that big one does strike out here along the West Coast. So, and that covers a large area. 50, 60-foot tsunami covering Northern California up through Vancouver Island ranges. Some areas will see higher levels of inundation there with the tsunami. Astoria being one of them, up through Aberdeen area as well. That's a fact. You know, a lot of folks think that, well, it hasn't happened since I've been alive. Well, you're only 30 years old. We've been in a very quiet zone over the past, I'd say, 300 years, you know. No major volcanic eruptions out here along the West Coast. Yeah, we had Mount St. Helens, right? We get it. There's a little bit of activity, but Mount Shasta, other areas around the Pacific Northwest, Cascadia, major earthquakes around the San Andreas Fault. It's a matter of time before things kick back up. And, you know, our reasoning, our human thinking tends to downplay a lot of threats out there. And, well, I'm here to kind of help folks realize that that's not a, you know, we don't live in a fairy tale world out here along the West Coast. The potential for the threat is real, and it's increasing every single day. Into the Alaska area, of course, we've seen that 5-pointer kick up early this morning, about 6 o'clock in the morning. Since then, some further activity across the Cook Inlet, getting a further cluster of activity across the Mount Martin area down here around the this area of Alaska. No major movement to report. There's been a little bit of activity kicking up here, including a 4.1 near McCarthy, Alaska. Now, this activity occurring about 5 kilometers to surface areas over the last 24 hours or so, including a 4.1. A noticeable uptick in activity here across this area. We'll watch that pretty closely. It's been showing quite a bit of uptick in movement recently. The Western Pacific here, things very quiet. There's not a whole lot being reported, at least on the USGS scale. As far as the EMSC model goes, some older movement quakes, a little bit of 3s across the Java Trench, a new 3.2 into the very southwestern edge of Australia. Older activity across New Zealand. Things are kind of dying down there currently as we speak. We did see, though, if you talk about, well, I can't really say predictions, but accuracy in terms of looking at areas of forecast. We did chat about areas in between the New Zealand area, which is what's going on here, and areas around the Papua New Guinea westward area. And we kind of pinpointed this specific area as a prime suspect for activity today. And what do you know? Lo and behold, it struck right within that zone of activity. Now, 5.0, not a huge earthquake. Not calling this as a magic earthquake prediction at all. We don't do that here on this channel. But we do look at seismically inactive zones between periods of seismically active areas, and that includes large uptick here around the Molucca Sea over the past week, and areas within the last couple days around the New Zealand area, and that technically puts this zone here at risk, basically around the Solomon Islands area, where this Vanuatu area where this 5.0 struck earlier today. Not a whole lot going on further northward across the Nepal, Himalaya area, or the Middle East. Things are very quiet there across the region right now. Only a handful of some 2s across the area of the Mediterranean, the Atlantic Ocean, all quiet for now. South America, absolutely gone quiet. Only a couple 3s in the last couple hours. I think, you know, as we note here, across the globe, there's a 3.5 that just, or 3.9 that just came into the Molucca Sea area. As we look at the areas of interest here across the globe that are showing some seismic increase, I think notable areas are definitely along the Middle America Trench for now. West Coast, there's obviously we got tremor activity into the Cascadia subduction zone, but we're not seeing a whole lot of earthquake activity upstream. Alaska is kind of a big one. Aside from the 5.0 that kicked up there into the Cook Inlet area, we're seeing activity head eastward. And also deeper regions of the subduction zone here between the North American and the Pacific Plate. That's a good indicator there of some regional stress. I think that's noteworthy to watch here for some potential movement. All right, let's see what else we got. Yellowstone National Park. Let me chime in here real quick and see what we got. Yeah, check that out. Check it out there around the Maple Creek area. Looking a little bit more active there, popping off a couple more earthquakes there in a somewhat of a swarm fashion. Now, this is not a swarm yet, but we'll see what it brings about overnight. There's a good handful of earthquakes there, about 10 earthquakes or so, probably a little bit more over the last few hours. And they look kind of look like they appear to be centered around the Purple Mountain Maple Creek area. Now, the USGS, well, you know, I wish I could say yes, they're reporting them, but it's after hours, and no doubt in the morning time when they all have their coffee and whatnot, they'll probably report it. I really wish, you know, we could change that preliminary earthquake data reporting system here for certain areas of interest, because they have the technology. Obviously, the technology is there. Whenever an earthquake is produced, seismograph stations send out a, you know, many of them send out different data, different phases of data, and they all put out a preliminary earthquake report to the earthquake catalog. But in this case, afternoon, anytime after the noon time, probably in the evening time, in the weekdays and the weekends, they don't report anything above 2.5. That's a fact. I've seen it. So tomorrow morning, we'll probably see some of this earthquake being reported after review from a seismologist that can verify the accuracy of the location, the depth, and the magnitude that takes place there with that swarming. But I definitely kind of wish that they would put out at least some type of preliminary earthquake data when it comes to a little swarm like this. All right, let's see what else we got. Space weather activity. We had a little popcorn popping off here earlier. A little C flare peaked up into the C3.9 category. Now, it's definitely not a major flare whatsoever, but I would say a little uptick, right? I'm not for sure exactly where that came from. I'm guessing more than likely a far side sunspot. Looking at the ones that are currently facing us, they have this area circled here that I mentioned earlier in my update that is worth noting. That's going to be, well, it's going to be a newly named sunspot here soon, but it is getting its act together, starting to grow fairly nicely as a little solar storm there. We'll watch out here for some potential flaring activity here in the coming days. It's probably going to be named 3209 is what I'm guessing. We'll see what it gets numbered here in the overnight and possibly tomorrow hours. No major coronal hole facing us, so we're looking at some fairly calm conditions here across the auroras, or across the upper latitudes there for aurora conditions. Let's see, what else do we have here? I think that's about it, guys. Weather conditions, I will kind of jump in on that real quick because a lot of folks want to know what's going on out there with the weather, at least here along the West Coast. We do, yeah, no tornadoes out there from that model, but I do like to check out what's going on here along the West Coast. And there's our next storm system. It's definitely not a big one. It's going to be a quick glance, a quick shot at some precipitation. Notice how this system just dies out soon as it hits the inland area of the North American plate. But we are expected to pick up between roughly about 1/4 of an inch to maybe 3/10 of an inch of rain here in the Sacramento Valley. Other areas around the Coast Range, potentially portions of the Sierra Nevada picking up more, but don't really expect much. Coming around Saturday into Sunday, there's a little bit more potent storm, bringing in some further rainfall and snowfall into the west coast. A little break coming up here for the next week into February, and potentially another storm system there around the 12th and 13th time frame, as this model shows some further rainfall coming in. And we'll kind of watch it, see how it plays out. It is kind of trending wetter as we look at these weather models. So, and that's good news, of course. We need further rainfall and further snowfall pack, snowpack up in the mountains. Definitely need that for sure. All right, guys. Also, by the way, I'm probably going to be throwing out quite a few shorts. That's YouTube's versions of short videos. You can upload roughly about 60 seconds of interesting video that you may find or come across. I'm going to be testing out a little experiment here. YouTube has recommended that I put out short videos at a a good rate. So I'm going to be throwing out quite a bit here over the next few weeks, next couple months. You'll see videos. Potentially barbecues, weather events, stuff like that. So we'll see, kind of see how that plays out in terms of the response that I'm looking for, that YouTube is suggesting here. Kind of a new thing. YouTube Shorts have been around for a while, but they definitely pushed me to push out some video here on my channel. So just look for that here coming up soon. Actually, I put out 2 tonight with the barbecue and bonfire going on outside. Just kind of playing around with it, see how it works out. All right, guys, have a good night. Stay safe out there. Tomorrow is Friday, right? It's Friday, but that doesn't mean, well, it means I got a couple more tests I got to do, a couple more quizzes coming up in terms of the spring semester that I put myself into. But hey, it's all good. Have a good night, folks. We'll catch you guys a little bit later on tomorrow sometime. Peace out.